believe we're recording. I did a whole interview the other day with someone and the darn thing never recorded. Can you believe it?
Oh no.
No. So super excited to have the wonderful Viv Groskop with us today, who is, everyone will know her. She's a stand-up comedian. She is a voice and presentation expert. Her podcast is, it's mind-blowing. You've interviewed everybody on the planet from Hillary Obama, you see, from Hillary Clinton. I'm obsessed with Michelle Obama because I've been reading about her in your book recently. Tell us who else you've interviewed on your podcast, and tell us what you're really doing now.
So today is the launch of our new series, which is the 8th series. I can't believe we've got up to 8 series. And today is Tara Moore, who's the author of Playing Big, which is one of my favorite books about women and work. She's an absolute powerhouse on how to overcome inner critic and really be fearless. She's an absolute authority on that. So yeah, Tara Moore, M-O-H-R, really recommend checking out her work. She's on How to Own the Room podcast. And it's a double download today. So the other one is Laura Bates, who is author of a new book called Men Who Hate Women, which looks into the whole rise of misogyny online. It's completely fascinating. And she's the founder of Everyday Sexism. And all of the women I speak to, so we've had probably over 60 or 70 interviews now, and it's everyone from Hillary Clinton, Margaret Atwood, Mira Sayal, Catherine Tate, brilliant tech speaker Anne-Marie Imafidon, who I think is one of the best speakers in the world, Dr. Rosanna Allen Khan, who's been a really influential MP during COVID-19. She's a doctor, she still works in the NHS, also a fantastic speaker. All of these women, obviously really interesting, not even necessarily always high profile. Some of them are behind the scenes, but they all have experience in their field of what I call owning the room. So this can be everything from being a fantastic public speaker to being a really great communicator in your field face to face or in a very small environment, to somebody who, for example, next week we've got Tasmin Little, who's a world-class concert violinist. So obviously she owns the room by playing her instrument. She's also happens to be a great speaker. But what I want to get into in the podcast, and the reason that I launched it, is because I want to look at all the different ways that women occupy power, own space, find ways to kind of put their ego to one side and communicate what it is that they really have come here on earth to do, and do that and think about that in all different ways. Because when I first wrote the book, How to Own the Room, I very much didn't want it to be a conversation about public speaking, because I think public speaking is so boring and it's such a kind of old school Etonian idea. It's so off-putting. And I wanted to showcase women who really own it in that kind of American Oprah kind of sense, in whatever way they want to, rather than thinking, oh, in order to become successful, I must become a good public speaker. And it's interesting, you know, in the last 6 months, the idea of being a public speaker has completely transformed anyway, because obviously we're not in public space anymore. So I feel like that conversation of how we own our own agenda, how we communicate it to other people, how we feel confident and relaxed, how we put our ego to one side so that we can connect with other people, it's become more important this year more than ever.
I love that, and I adore your book, which is...
Oh, thanks, Fiona.
But I've got to say, I have a soft spot for this. I adore this so much, How to Own the Room. And I agree with you. You know, it's so great that this isn't just about how to stand on stage and, you know, all of that stuff. I love it because it's about getting over your fear. In life, to be the person, as you say, that you're here to be. And of course, the title of this is How to Be Fearless. Of course, you've been a stand-up comedian, for goodness sakes, as well. So for a lot of people, that's unimaginable. You know, public speaking is one thing, being a stand-up comedian is another. But I love what you just said about getting over your ego.
Yeah.
Could you
Uh,
talk a little bit about that,
yeah,
Fiona?
well, at the heart of it, that's all it really is. It's pretty simple. And, you know, I was really influenced probably 20 years ago now by your book and by the idea of being your own life coach, way before anybody talked about coaching, in the days when it was kind of slightly shameful to admit that you love Oprah Winfrey. And the idea of having a coach, you know, 20 years ago in the UK was seen as something being really cheesy and awful. And I was really early on board with that and with your work. So that was really influential for me. And the message that I've always had from finding out about those kind of ideas that eventually led to me going into stand up and doing different kinds of writing and putting aside some of my own fears, was realizing that a lot of that work is about recognizing that our fears and the things holding us back are really ego. Ego is a word that we don't use very often because it's got a sort of specialist connotation from psychotherapy and Freud, or on the other hand, it's got the connotation of someone who has a big ego, like, you know, Donald Trump. I'm sure I'm not saying anything controversial even to people who are fans of his, but we have this idea that ego is something that belongs to bad people. But ego is simply something that we all have, and you can have a very healthy ego. You know, and a healthy ego is someone with a sense of self-worth, who has something to get up for in the morning, who knows why they're here, who knows what they need to do. And we all have little knocks to our ego the whole time. Like coronavirus has been a massive knock to lots of our egos, and to everybody who loses their job, who loses salary, who's the rug is pulled out from under them. We have blows to our ego all of the time. But the stuff around fear and performance and where ego fits into that was for me really, really heightened by going into stand up. And that's kind of how I learnt at the sharp end of things how much ego can get in the way of you learning anything. And it's really just a sort of manifestation of fear that feels it. When you listen to your ego, it can sometimes feel, when your ego is in a bad place, it can feel like it's telling you the truth. So when I first started stand up, if I would have a bad gig, and of course you're going to have bad gigs, or if I would get a really difficult heckle, or I would have what I thought was a good gig, and then afterwards somebody would say something horrible to me. Or then later on, when I came to do Edinburgh shows, I did 7 years of one-woman shows at the Edinburgh Fringe, I would get a show that would get like a 5-star review and a 2-star review. And my ego would feed on the 2-star review. Some people's ego might feed on the 5-star review. That's another problem.
Mhm.
And you learn very quickly that these things get in the way of what I think of as process, or, you know, some people think of it as creative process. And that's basically what you use to get through the day, to do stuff. So if you're focusing on the fact that you've got a 2-star review, or this person didn't like you, or this gig went badly, you're not actually thinking, what do I need to do today to make the next show better? Or what do I need to do today to make sure that I'm well prepared enough to not let these knocks put me back? Because the knocks are always going to be there. We're always going to find different things that put us off. And by developing a healthy ego and setting aside that fearful ego that feeds on negative criticism and the idea that things aren't possible, it's all going to go wrong, someone's not going to like it. So easy to fall into that, in particular this year with the coronavirus. We're so surrounded by anxiety and fearful messaging. It can go inside you, and your ego just has a field day. So all of this work is about learning to just sit really comfortably with your own ego, think, I'm not better than anyone else, but I'm not worse than anyone else either. I'm just going to do whatever things, activities I need to do to make my work, and just get on with it, and not be constantly feasting on criticism or praise.
I love that, because a lot of performers, famously, Julie Walters is one of them, made a decision many years ago at the start of her career actually not to read any press. I think Alison Steadman is another, like none at all. Not even the good stuff, like none of it, because otherwise you're playing, you know.
Oh
To,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And a lot of my thoughts and ideas around this are influenced by the fact that before I went into stand up, which was about 10 years ago, I'd had 15 years as a journalist, and mostly I interviewed people, and I've interviewed Julie Walters, Judi Dench. I'm trying to think of who, oh yeah, Helen Mirren, or really top class performers. Exactly as you say, they are completely uninfluenced by these things because they are guarding and protecting their ego. And I mean that in a really positive sense, because usually when we say, oh, somebody's is guarding their ego, it makes it sound like they're fragile. It's the opposite. You know, these people are keeping their strength by making sure that other people's chatter and noise and feedback doesn't come in. And that doesn't mean that they never accept constructive criticism or feedback that would improve their performance, but they're selective about where they would seek that out. So they know, you know, they're working with the best people, they're working with a director or writers who they want to work with. And if there's something not great about their performance, they'll tell them. And they'll tell them in a way that is sensitive or in a way that is respectful. When you start listening to reviews and feedback and social media comments and blah, 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 you don't even know where any of these things are coming from. You have no idea what the agenda is of these people. So I learned sort of early on, sometimes kind of amazed actually by actors in particular, that they just are so disciplined about not getting involved in that. It's brilliant. And I often give the example as well of Richard E. Grant. He talked about this when he was up for an Oscar for the first time this year. And he talked about never, ever, ever watching himself on screen. And that's another thing that if you interview actors, they will often talk about. And you kind of feel amazed by that, because you just think, well, why would you be an actor if you don't want to watch yourself on screen? But for them, the work is about doing the work. It's about showing up and doing the acting. Why would they want to watch themselves? You know, they've got other people to tell them what was good about that performance, or, you know, what they can use from that performance somewhere else. They don't need to be constantly analyzing and criticizing themselves in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. So all of this piece around fear and getting over your ego, it's often about learning how to be in a comfortable place. And I don't mean like never go out of your comfort zone, but it's about learning how to comfort yourself and support yourself properly so that you can do your work. And I've never found anybody who continues to do good work and is really happy in their life who reads all of their reviews. I've found lots of people who read all their reviews who are very miserable. Both good and bad reviews cause misery.
I love that. And the other thing is, if you're watching yourself on the screen, I mean, that's going to make you very self-conscious. And so for a performer or an actor, the worst thing of all would to be self-conscious. It's often why models struggle actually to become really good actors, because they're, you know, find it very difficult to lose that self-consciousness. But there's something else that you said as well, Viv, that I want to pick up on. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something about the importance of overcoming fear, and owning the room so that you can do what you're here to do in the world, so that you can be all that you're here to be in the world. Tell me how important that is for you.
Yeah, that is really important. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to a lot of people, because we're very uncomfortable with having this kind of messiah idea of we have come here for a reason. But on some level, we have all come here for a reason. And unless we find that reason and find that purpose, our lives become meaningless. And this is a really dangerous thing. And I'm seeing a lot of people butt up against this year, because when things change profoundly in global circumstances, and then the impact on you on a small level, and this isn't even getting into people who have been sick and experienced bereavements. I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff of, you know, recession, people losing their jobs, people questioning their working life. We really need to find even very small pockets of meaning that in some small way show that it's good that we were here. So it could even be very tiny things, like if all you can imagine, if all you can manage in a given moment is to be a good neighbor, great. Just be a good neighbor today. That's enough meaning. or, you know, be a good parent or a slightly better parent. I don't really believe in being a good parent, being a good enough parent, or being a slightly better spouse. I'm very, very bad at doing that myself. It's not necessarily about saying, you know, I'm like Gandhi and I've come here to change the world. That, you know, it doesn't have to be like that for every single one of us. You know, great if you do have a mission, but your mission can be very personal and very small. But it's really important to recognize that you have it and give yourself credit for it. And I think often we feel maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a British thing, or feel a bit embarrassed to think, well, what did I actually come here? Why am I here? What difference am I going to make, however small? We feel a bit embarrassed to ask that question, again, because we think it's ego. But it's almost like the opposite of ego. It's like, have enough ego to admit that you deserve to have a life with meaning. So what's that going to look like? And once you question that and you don't want to dig into that fear is getting in the way. The fear of, oh, well, maybe I'm not that important. Maybe nobody would notice if I wasn't here anyway. And that is just no way to live. There's no way to live.
That's a dangerous way to live, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, the thing with you that really inspires me about you, Viv, is that you were a very successful journalist. You worked on all the top nationals, Express, Telegraph, and then, you know, you had your children.
Probably my finest moments, but yeah.
Then you had your children and you wanted to go freelance, and you made that work. So you had the freedom of being freelance. And then as you were bringing up your children, you thought to yourself, you know, there's more. There's more for me to do. There's more to life. I've got to get more going on in my life. And I love that because you went and did it. And so often it's easy to have that feeling of frustration and a sense that there's more, there needs to be more. But then unfortunately people can stay there with that feeling of frustration. And I think that's disastrous. But you're that great inspiration for all of us because you went and did something about it. You tapped into this idea that actually, as you were growing up, you wanted to be a performer, but you had parents who were a little bit sensible, and many people are going to relate to that. So you didn't go off and be a performer. But then later in life, you gave yourself permission to go and do a bit of training in how to be a stand-up comedian. And then you like did 100 gigs. I mean, that's crazy. So there must have been something in you that drove you to overcome fear that possibly a lot of people might just sit with. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love your voice, by the way, Fiona. You have such a fabulous voice. I thank you for all those lovely things you've just said about me. I totally agree with you that many people, and I've done it, my God, I did it, you know, for 15 years or maybe longer. Like I didn't start doing stand-up until I was 35, 36. So, you know, how long did I sit on that impetus to want to do that without having any idea? Like I didn't even want to go and do an open mic gig. You know, I could have done an open mic gig anytime, and for 35 years I didn't do that. So I guess the question is why? You know, why do we not do those things? Why do some people eventually do them? Why do some people do them quite quickly? Other people do them eventually, and other people probably never do them. And there's an amazing story about Steve Martin along these lines, where he wasn't particularly confident about going into performing. This is all in his absolutely brilliant memoir, which is called Born Standing Up. He wasn't confident about going into performing because his family didn't encourage that. They wanted him to take the sensible path in life. Can you imagine that? Like depriving the world of Steve Martin. Anyway. And eventually he kind of launched himself. He ended up like living in a car, just going on the road and sleeping in his car, doing gigs, and taught himself how to be a performer. He kind of allowed himself to do it. And when he eventually got pretty good and he started doing more public gigs and bigger gigs, his father came to see one of his gigs. And his father was a real estate agent, so he sold property. And he was some kind of like community organizer in the real estate industry. And he ran the newsletter for the estate agents of the state that he lived in. and he reviewed Steve Martin's performance of the gig that he went to see when Steve Martin was still an amateur, his own son.
Oh my God.
And he gave him a 1-star review.
Oh my
He
God.
gave him a review that just said, like, this was a terrible attempt at comedy. This man is not funny.
Oh.
Just like unbelievable. And yeah, Steve Martin tells this story, and I think eventually he came to an accommodation with his father, and they, you know, forgave each other for everything before his father died. But
Wow.
it was all because his father had always wanted to do something different with his life and had never done it. So for him to see his son do that, it was unbearable for him, unbearable.
Wow.
To admit the grief of that kind of the road less traveled, you know, the road that you didn't take.
Yeah.
And that story is always, I so often remember that story and just think, we must never become that person. Like, none of us, not for ourselves, not for our children. You know, if there is something that is eating away at you, it can be a big thing or a small thing. Go try it. Just try a tiny thing of it. And I think what switched for me, there were some external factors that helped. So external factors are really helpful. This is why, you know, I don't want to be one of these awful people who's going to say that the coronavirus is going to bring many blessings in disguise. But times of great change and unpredictability can be very good as external factors for pushing you towards the thing that you really ought to have already been doing, but you were too scared to do. You know, I had a redundancy when I was 27 that pushed me out of a newspaper office into freelancing. And I never would have done that without a redundancy. And that kind of frightens me, that I needed that external factor, but I would have never have had the self-belief to say, yeah, it's fine to work for yourself and not have a salary. So external factors can be really useful. And for me, when I started performing comedy, it was just after the financial crash of 2008, 2009. The internet and social media were becoming more and more of a force in our lives as media consumers. And I could really see the writing on the wall for the print journalism that I used to make my living by. And it gave me permission to think, this is not going to last forever. So whatever the other thing is that I could do, I should do it. And also, you know, you start small, and doing the 100 gigs, I did 100 gigs in 100 consecutive nights. Wow. As a way of finding out in 3 months, it's only 100 days, wow. 3 months, is this for me or not? Am I wasting my time? Am I serious about this? Is this a hobby? Is this a profession? Can I actually get any good if I do it that often? So you can set yourself small tasks that are achievable within a short amount of time, that will be a bit like, you know, treat yourself like a guinea pig or an experiment of, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but what's an experiment that I can do to get some data, you know, as to whether this is going to work or not.
I love that. But here's the thing, starting small, 100 gigs and 100 nights. I don't
know. That is so small in that world. That's tiny and totally unimpressive. So, you know,
I think it's pretty impressive. But here's the thing, you know, because look, you take some of this for granted, Viv, and I want to pull it out because it's so good for people to hear this. Because look, there was a certain point where you acknowledged, like a lot of journalists at the time would have been acknowledging and were acknowledging, because I know a lot of them. They were acknowledging that the writing was on the wall for their particular career, and that it was going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. Now, you and other people that I know, other journalists, did something about that. They got like a side hustle going. And for many, it's turned into a very successful and lucrative business. And for others, they battened down the hatches and they just didn't confront and face the truth. And they're now, well, they're stuck in jobs that are paying less in some cases than they were getting paid all those years ago. So there's a real lesson there, Viv, in, you know, facing the writing on the wall, facing that fear, which of course would be nice if it wasn't there, but actually facing it head on and going, okay, it's there, it's gonna happen, I need to handle this, I need to address it. Does that make sense, Viv?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I do think this is an incredibly personal idea, and I don't necessarily think that everybody should face the writing on the wall and go for, you know, why don't you become a yoga instructor? Why don't you open a cafe? You know, I mean, I've had lots of friends who have had wobbles in their career, and we all have wobbles in times when our industries are going through low patches, or we're working in a place or in a job that just doesn't suit us. And sometimes you do have to tough those things out, and you know, toughing things out can last for a while sometimes. And I also am very aware that for many people, they don't necessarily live for their work, and sometimes when a job changes a lot, it can, and just as it is happening for people at the moment during COVID-19, it can be really healthy to think, you know, I am not my job, I am not my career, I'm also a friend, a sister, a daughter, a mother, a member of a swimming club. Oh, I'm not a member of a swimming club, but whatever you are, that is your identity. Many parts of your identity separate from your work. And there can be times in our lives when we need to lean into those and almost perfect and enjoy those aspects of our lives, so that we feel that that's where we're getting our meaning from. So yeah, I totally agree with you that it's rarely a bad thing to face your fear, however scary that is. And it's better to face the fear than be stuck. A feeling of stuckness is the worst thing, but there are other ways to face your stuckness than deciding to become a stand-up comedian and do 100 gigs in 100 nights. Right? Like, you know, deciding that you're actually going to commit the next 3 months to lose a lot of weight, or to become really fit because it's going to give you more confidence, or you're going to learn how to cook amazing Japanese food, or, you know, lots of the kind of more positive little lockdown projects that people did. We all have our, you know, we need to just know ourselves and know what gives us fire and energy and enthusiasm, and have the courage to lean into those things and not be afraid to give yourself permission to do them.
I love that, because you know what you're really saying is it's like a manifesto for life, to acknowledge what gives you enthusiasm, what leaves you feeling enthusiastic. I mean, isn't that the thing, really? You know, and being stuck, as you say, I think being stuck and being scared is just the worst thing in the world, honestly, because you know, the creative mind closes down. You're like the rabbit in the headlights. You can't move. You're glued to the spot. So facing those fears, for me, I think is the way to go. And you know, it's that famous saying that the universe speaks to you first of all in a whisper, and
Yeah.
shout, and then a scream. So honestly, I really do see people who shy away from the reality of what's going on because they're so paralyzed by fear. And honestly, I don't see good things happening as a result. I see things getting worse because it's like the universe is shaking the heck out of them to wake up. Because I think life is all about growth. Honestly, I think life is all about growth. And
excuse me, speaking of growth,
shoot.
not COVID related, I assure you.
Facing those challenges and facing their reality head on. But you know, the thing about you, Viv, is I got a feeling that you also put good support around you, or that you have good support around you.
Oh yeah.
You know, remember you and I we did this panel thing together, some Amsterdam thing a while back, and you happened to mention that you're close to your sister and that you will speak to her once a week and you will say, hey, I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that. And you'll run it past her. And I thought, that is fabulous. That's having a speed dial coach / best friend / mentor right there.
Yeah, don't tell her that. She'll want to invoice me.
I know. But how important do you think that is? Because you've made huge changes.
It's so important, and it's also important to acknowledge this. So I'm really glad that you brought it up, because I think sometimes in these conversations about changing career or facing your fear or changing things in your life because you just can't survive the way that things were pre-COVID, they don't acknowledge the support that some people have and some other people just don't have. And I am kind of in two camps with this, really. On the one hand, I do have a lot of support that is kind of nothing to do with me and is just luck. You know, well, in some ways, I've been married for 20 years, and I have worked really hard at my marriage, but I'm lucky enough that I met someone and that's what we've managed to create together. That's luck. Not everyone has that luck. I have 3 lovely children. Again, I'm so lucky to have that. It has been hard work too, though. And then I have my sister, and I have a fantastic network of friends and colleagues who I keep in touch with. Not suggesting that it isn't hard work to do those things sometimes, and you have to do the work to maintain all of those relationships. But it is also luck if you have those things. On the other hand, I'm also very conscious of creating things in my life that wouldn't be there through luck, that allow me to be supported. And that's something that's taken me a really, really long time to learn, and is a big lesson that I've learned through freelancing and messing things up lots of times. I need a lot of admin support, for example, because if I have to do it, it doesn't happen. So and how do I do that? You know, I make sure that I earn enough money to pay for really strong admin support. So bookkeeper, accountant, have virtual PA who does a lot of other admin stuff that I would just never do it. I'm so terrible about that kind of thing. So, and then I have childcare that I've always been careful to earn enough money to pay for childcare. And this is a conversation we don't hear very often, and that people are not very open about. And instead, people prefer to say, oh, well, it's all right for you because you have X. Mm-hmm. You know, you have a nanny, or you have a, housekeeper, whatever. I don't have a housekeeper, by the way. But the reason, and some people have those things because, they won the lottery, or they're really rich, or it's their family's housekeeper who's been in the housekeeping in their family for generations. Great. That's like probably 3 people have that. Yeah. But we like to find excuses as to why other people have a better support system than us. And sometimes those excuses are valid because luck did not go your way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're not valid because you can take control. You know, you can find a way to earn more money so that you can hire this person to make your life easier in some way. Mm-hmm. I can imagine lots of people listening to this and thinking, well, no, I can't find a way to earn more money. Well, I don't know how far I want to go with saying this, but I sort of think you always can. There is always something. You can always take a second job, a third job. You know, these are choices. So if you choose to be in an environment where you're very unsupported and you're putting up with that, to just try, how do you actually change that though, is very hard. It's about really digging down into, how can I make a difference? What can I do slightly differently? Where can I sort of work smarter and not harder? Where are some talents that I've got that other people might pay for that I haven't even thought of? You know, asking your friends, you know, if I was wanting to get an extra £500 a month for this, can you see a way that I could do that? You know, making that conversation more open. A person who's absolutely brilliant on this, I recommend looking up their stuff, is Marie Forleo, Forleo. And she has this motto, it's all figure outable. And she's helped tens of thousands of usually she's got quite a young audience in the US, mostly women, but a lot of men as well. And she has helped people who have been homeless, you know, totally down on their luck, nothing going for them, but with this idea of it's all figure outable, and ask for advice, maintain positivity in your life, keep going. You can find a way out of almost any situation by seeking the right kind of support. And it's when you start to think, well, I don't have any support, it's all very well for you, then you're already in a really difficult zone. So you need to get out of that and be thinking, I know this is really hard. I know I've suffered some really difficult things. I'm in a bad place. But somewhere there's somebody who can help me, and I can probably even get the beginning of that help for free. I can certainly talk to my friends for free. But again, that's about ego. So sometimes the ego will then say, well, everybody hates you and it doesn't matter anyway, and you just have to sit in your bed and get on with it. And then you just have to identify, you know, what it is that's really holding you back. Is it you? Is it your situation? Is it your inability to ask for support? Yeah.
Well, the thing with you that I know about you and I've experienced from you is that you're actually a really generous person. Because no, it's true. When we did that event together in Amsterdam, virtually, of course, social distancing and all that malarkey, you know, within 5 minutes of us finishing, you had put this beautiful graphic that you'd created on Instagram and everywhere saying, oh my goodness, I was so excited. There I was on the same panel with Fiona Harrold, and 20 years ago, her book, Beyond Life, and you were promoting me. I was blown away. So
Oh,
when,
that's sweet of you.
yeah, no, it's true. And not everybody does that. You know, people can be a little bit closed and contracted. So, you know, when we go out in a generous way and we give, I think it really invites the same back, which means that you can go out and ask for support and ask for help because your heart is open. Chances are you've already been doing it with that person, with people. So you got a lot of goodwill already in the banked. So I think this is so good for people to hear, Viv, not to be isolated. Please, people, don't be isolated, because being isolated is the worst thing in the whole world, because you drive yourself crazy. Fear goes through the roof and you're in a corner and you're stuck and life is just flipping impossible. So there's so much to take from this, Viv. I'm just going to try and pull it together into a couple of points, which I wrote down.
Oh.
So one is to manage your ego. Don't let your ego get out of control. It's not a bad thing. Keep it on the right side of healthy self-worth, self-esteem. Manage feedback. So don't be going out there and reading the papers and what they say about you necessarily. Take feedback selectively from people who you trust and actually know a little bit about what the heck you're doing. I think I'm going to go with mentor only because it starts with an M and I got my M's going on here. So, but it doesn't have to be a paid mentor. I'm talking about support, having a support structure that you either pay for or you set up an arrangement with someone so that you have that regular structured feedback, accountability, very important, and support. And then my final M, I can read my own writing, is mission. So the mission is about perhaps what you want to contribute to the world, but it also could be personal, as it was with Viv and what Viv was saying, because it sounds like what you were saying, Viv, was, you know, you really couldn't bear the thought of being stuck and not living this life that you had wanted to live for such a long time, for all the time that you were growing up. So I honestly do think that you've got to give yourself permission to tell the truth about what would make your life meaningful. Hey, we just got another M there. But truly, what would make your life meaningful? You know, sometimes I do drive myself a bit crazy because I do have a drive within me. But I believe that we all have a drive. And the only difference is between some people and others is that, you know, you got to take the drive seriously and you got to think, now what's going to let me fulfill this drive? Otherwise I'm going to drive myself crazy. So I'd rather take the risk myself of getting out there and fulfilling the drive than driving myself crazy at home. So honor the drive, honor the impulse, and give yourself permission to make your life meaningful in this mission-driven way. That's what I'm really taking from you today, Viv. And I really think if we take all of that on board, then fear is just like, what's that? It's irrelevant. We've just kicked it, you know, to touch. It just doesn't rise up and be a big part in our life. We turn it into something that is exciting and that motivates us to be out there and making our life work in a great way. Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Viv?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself. It's hard sometimes to dig into what those things are, but there are so many resources now and so many free resources online where you can start, you know, you can type into Google, like, what's my purpose in life? and it will come up with like 6 million results, and just click on some things that you think look interesting.
Yeah.
To dig into those questions, so important. I'm going to give you one more M, which is mind other people's business. So instead of minding your own business, like mind other people's business. This is like the flip side of the support idea that you were talking about. If you feel like you don't have very much support and you're feeling lonely, it can give you such a boost to think, how can I mind other people's business? How can I support them? Because not only are you, it's not doing it for a selfish reason, so you can then ask them for a favor further down the line, although you probably will be able to do that. It's because when you help people and when you give people something, you actually get more. This is psychologically, scientifically proven. You get more than if they give something to you. So giving and minding other people's business and supporting them is actually the best way to support yourself.
I really love that. I really love that. Don't want to bring it back to me again, but I'm just going to. But seriously, at the beginning of this lockdown, I was so enraged, with what was going to happen, what I could see was going to happen. People being stuck at home, their mental health going, down the pan, everything that happened. And I thought to myself, no, I'm going to do something. What can I do? And it was a Sunday morning, and I was sitting up in bed, trawling through my phone, seeing what was about to unfold. And first thing I did was put posts out there about, look, fear, you got to get a handle on it right now. You're in the driving seat. Remember that. Take control of your mind, all of that stuff. And then I set up something called the Coaching Club, which was completely free. And I was doing, Facebook Lives every day and motivating people in the best way that I possibly could. I've got to tell you, I felt more alive during that time than I just can remember feeling for forever, really. And when lockdown was easing, a part of me was like, there won't be any need for me to be this, in your face, fully alive, woohoo person. Isn't that amazing? So I sort of got to find myself another mission or another, where can I be super useful? Yeah. And I lost all my self-consciousness as well, because I was not doing videos or Facebook Lives or anything at all before that, because I'd turn it into some big drama, like I needed to have my blow dry and I needed to make a person right here, all of that stuff. And all that went by the wayside. And I just, nah. There's more important stuff here now than me worrying about how I'm looking. So yeah, my gosh, that made me feel so alive. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Viv, for your time. Is there anything?
Thank you.
Tell us about how people can reach you. Give us some of your podcast, your latest book.
Yeah, so if you're interested in confidence and public speaking, although I hate the expression public speaking, maybe if you hate it too, check out the book, How to Own the Room, Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking. It's not just for women, it's questioning what power looks like and how we can all find our voices. That's the book. There's also a podcast now in its 8th series, How to Own the Room. And we also have a sister podcast, which is called We Can Rebuild Her, which is interviews with really inspiring women about how they've been rethinking their lives and reinventing their businesses during COVID-19. I really recommend listening to that, especially if you're having a bit of a COVID wobble. It's very honest, inspiring conversations. And if you're looking for a new direction, or you want some inspiration, or you're thinking, what even is my ambition now? Then I have a book called Lift as You Climb, Women and the Art of Ambition, which is all about what I call altruistic ambition. And it's this idea of getting ahead without trampling on anyone else, moving forward whilst taking lots of other people with you. And whilst I wrote it before this year happened, it feels like that is the kind of motivation that's going to take us forward now, is not how we can get ahead as individuals, but how we can all move forward together. So How to Own the Room and Lift as You Climb.
Thank you so much. I love that. I love that. Thank you, Viv. Lots of love, my darling.
Lots of love. Thank you.
So very much. Bless you. Thank you. I will just stop the recording right there.